Okay, so we were talking about the sort of fall of Charlemagne and the impact of, again, people coming in to raid Europe. It becomes ironic to me that later Europe does the same thing to, North and South America. But around 1,000, so it's a couple hundred years after Charlemagne dies, some level of order gets restored. Okay, and there's the trade sort of resumes, and you end up with people kind of again learning to do things. So in the 200-year period, you can lose a lot of knowledge, especially if you don't write. Right? We got computers, we got all this stuff, we got this video machine, but this video software that's recording what I'm doing. Imagine if there was none of that and you didn't know how to write. So how would you learn this stuff? And so in 200 years, a lot of things can happen. And so about 1,000, things start to turn around, and again, you're looking to these monasteries, right, as a source of where they might continue to keep skills alive, where there could be books that you could learn from, where there could be drawings that you could refer to. There's a cultural revival that occurs around this time. Remember that this is about the time of the Crusades, okay, and it's about this time that there's a religious revival. And so in reading through the book, it talks about that in this time period there was an explosion of church building. So the pilgrimage routes are now in full force. They're building churches for the pilgrims to have stopping points. They're trying to create some level of a safety, a network of roads and places to stop so that people can go on the pilgrimages. So looking at one of these pilgrimage churches, right? This is the Church of St Foy. It's located in France. It was built around 1050, let's call it. So it was built in the mid-11th century. Remember, 11th century refers to 10, right? Because the first century is 0. So, and this is one of the churches that was built. Again, remember we said that Romanesque architecture would often be found where? In the city? Out in the country, right? And so you look, this gives you a perfect example. This is St Foy today. It's literally out in the middle of the sticks. There's like a small town that grew around it, but it's out in a wilderness area. And so this church was developed as a pilgrimage church. And so it has the side aisles that allow a congregation to be seated, and while a congregation is seated and Mass is taking place, pilgrims can come in and walk around the ambulatory and visit all of the relics that are located at that particular church. Okay? If we look up at the roof, we see this. And this thing here is what? Anybody remember? It's an arch. But what kind of arch? See? So, got this one? No? Transverse arch. It's an arch that runs perpendicular to the length of the nave. Okay? Looking up at the top, we have an octagonal sort of dome that's sitting up on top of there. Looking at the towers, we see examples of buttressing of the towers. Okay? This element right here, I don't remember talking about it, but there's this circular window, right? And that circular window is called a rose window. So that's something that you guys got to know. Did I talk about it in that list of stuff? So rose window is a really important element. It's a window that very often referenced the Virgin Mary, okay? And you'll find that it becomes more and more and more ornate as the churches develop over time. All right, so we talked about this thing right in here that's sitting in front above the entrance doors. Does anybody remember the name of that? Does anybody remember the letter it starts with? T, correct. It's the tympanium. All right, very good. So I think that's it. We'll move on from there. What's this rounded form here called? Starts with an A. And apps. Don't be an apps. Okay. All right. Keep going. Okay. Different country altogether. In Ripoll, Spain. This is the Monastery of Santa Maria. All right. And again, we start to see. What's it made out of? Brick. Small unit masonry. Correct? Is it in the country? It is out in the country. Okay. And if you look at the plan, now this is in Spain, okay, and this is an early on church and built in the 11th century, right? Does it have double side aisles? So it's different because this is kind of the flattened Latin cross like we saw in Old St. John's, okay. We do see the apses and the location of many small altars to the ends. But we see the double aisle and the double aisle on the side with the nave sort of in the center. This is a church that has a cloister. That's what this thing is over here on the side because it was part of a monastery. All right, and it was a pilgrim church. All right, what's this thing called? Starts with an N. All right, I'm going to keep doing this so you guys understand. I'll put the PowerPoint up there, and you guys better look through it. Okay? All right, so that's called the narthex. All right? That becomes sort of the entrance to the church. I guess that's sort of in Spanish, but you guys can probably figure out that transepto means transept. Okay? So. All right, let's take a look at another one. This is the Church of Saint Etienne, and this was a pilgrimage church also, and if you think about it, when this church was built, there wasn't a major city around it, okay? But over time, the major city sort of grew around it, and so now it's now in the middle of town. This is an example of one of those churches that has sort of multiple styles. If you look at the time period that it was built, right? It was built over a very long time period, 200 years. Okay, and so this is an example of how you might find a church that has an interior that looks one way and maybe a westworks that has one character below and a different character sort of up above. Okay, and I'm not even sure. It's not a westworks. Why is it not a westworks? One, it's not in Germany. Westworks, right? There was another thing that I mentioned about the westwork that was different than just the west end of a church. And that was that the sides didn't protrude past the side aisles. All right. Taking a look at the inside, we see a series of sort of piles, right, coming down that are holding up the diagonal ribs and the main ribs. And we also notice that there is a space up at the top above the aisles. What's that called? Gallery. The gallery. Thank you. Somebody got that one. All right. Right on. Good man. But this is an old picture. So this one, you can see it's an old black and white. You can see that there's these nice, uncomfortable looking chairs. It's very Catholic, I guess. I'm not Catholic, but... and you can see the sort of the crossing, because the crossing is where the dome is, and you see an added amount of light sort of coming in. You can also see the clerestory windows allowing light in, and you can also see the groin vault, or it's not a groin vault, that would be a ribbed vault up at the top. This right here paints a clear picture, right, of the rib vault, because you can see where the pier is that has the transverse rib, and then you can see the diagonal ribs kind of coming over to the center of it. All right. This also kind of shows you the difference between where there might be a column and where there might be a pier. So if we look at this bay right in here, we have this as a pier coming all the way up, and then this one over here is also a pier that comes all the way up. But in the middle, there is a column that sort of is at the center of the bay. Okay. All right. We've got, in this particular case, a double ambulatory that goes around the apse. So these are ways that you can identify that this thing was kind of intended to be a pilgrimage church. All right, then we get to a really odd one. All right, this is a church in Germany called Hildesheim. And Hildesheim is unusual. Why does, look at the plan. Tell me what's odd about this church. The floor plan. Look at the floor plan. Floor plan's over here. You're looking over there. So what's odd? It's like two crosses. So how many apses do most churches have? One. How many apses does this church have? Kind of two, right? It's got a curve and a curve at this end. And actually, this church is accessed from the side. So this is a very, very, very unusual church. Okay? But the Germans tended to do very unusual things. Another unusual thing about this church, compared to most everything else that we've seen so far, something dealing with the interior and specifically the structure of the interior. What's odd about that compared to the other churches and buildings that we've seen so far? What kind of ceiling does it have? It's a flat ceiling. It does not have any vaulting or masonry up there, which tells you that this is a ceiling made of wood. Okay. The other ceilings, when you see the vaulting, you see the groin vault, you see the rib vault, that's telling you that those things are made out of masonry. This, on the other hand, has a wood ceiling. What is this arch here called? It's at the transept. The transept, or one of the transepts. I'm guessing that what we're looking at there is the smaller apsidal form. And it's sort of where the crossing is. I'm guessing. I don't know. I can't tell by looking at the image real clearly. Okay. Because it's definitely a crossing, but I don't think that there is sort of anything above it. But this would be considered a transverse arch. Okay. Here also you see the differentiation between piers. So see the big fat ones, and then you see the two columns in between it. Okay. All right. Let's go on to another one. All right. This is Speyer Cathedral, also in Germany. Okay. This one is not odd. It only has one apse, and I'm at 13 minutes, so I'm going to stop this one so I don't go over, and we'll continue it up. We'll pick it up in the next segment.